as a thought uh, think of this as a thought partnership as well. Hopefully that what is garnered here will continue afterwards. That this isn't a one and done. We'll share the hashtag. I know we're all on various forms of social media, but our hope is that the conversation continues and that we all become each other's thought partner. And if that happens, that's a win. And then kind of the second win is if maybe we go out and share our learning and with another potential thought partner or current thought partner, and how can we build and sustain that culture of thought partnership in our department, in our schoolhouse, in our district, in our classroom, in our PLC, whatever that may be. So very grateful to thought partner with all here. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sean. And just quickly, I'm Sarah Candela. I'm the community manager for Swivel. I taught high school English in New York State for almost 15 years before trekking across to California, to Los Angeles, which is where I live now, and kind of embarked on the community management and guidance side of education and ed tech. And that's where I've found myself ever since. And Sean and I, it might seem like we have known each other forever, but we've only been really, really bandmates, I guess, for a few months. And so, Sean, do you want to give a little background as to your career?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Sean Gaylord, and I am currently a school principal. I'm principal for the App State University's lab school, the Academy at Middle Fork in Walkertown, North Carolina, where I'm based and where I live. I'm also an author. I'm the author of The Pepper Effect. I've written various articles for various publications on music, education, leadership, and culture. I'm also 32 years in the gig of education. By trade, I'm a high school English teacher, but for the last 15 years or so, I have been a turnaround school principal throughout various schools in North Carolina and have served on all three levels of elementary, middle, and secondary. I also host a podcast as well, the Principal Liner Notes podcast. And if I'm not doing those things, and if I'm not with my family, I'm usually in a record store. Okay, Sarah, you want to go ahead and introduce our wonderful, esteemed panelists and
Sure.
friends?
I'm going to stop sharing so we can see them beautiful here while we talk about them. So we are welcoming our first three panelists for our first panel today. I'm going to welcome first Lauren Kaufman. She is a district leader, educator, learner, author, blogger, speaker. We can name all of the things, and Lauren does it, and she does them really well. I've interviewed Lauren. I was connected to Lauren by Sean, and I've interviewed Lauren on the Optimalist podcast, which is the podcast that I host for the community here at Swivel. Lauren is passionate about developing lifelong literacy practices in all learners and empowering teachers to share their gifts and leading with a coaching mindset, which is a big part of the conversation that we're going to have today. Hello, Lauren, and welcome.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful introduction. I'm blushing, smiling real big. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and honored, and welcome to all the participants tonight.
You want to take the next one, Sean?
Sure. Very honored to also have another current bandmate, Stacey Roshan. Stacey is a consultant. Stacey is the author of a wonderful book, Tech with Heart, which I highly recommend. She is very much interspersed in providing support and spaces for building empathy through technology and building relationships with technology as well. And she has done so many great things with various ed tech companies, has served as a consultant, a blogger. I highly recommend her wonderful book, Tech with Heart, which not only tells her how-to and her why behind that, but also provides a wonderful autobiographical thread throughout the book. Her story is so meaningful, and I'm so grateful, Stacey, that you're going to be sharing a lot of your story and a part of your heart with us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I know it comes from your heart, and I'm so glad to be connected to you and also really excited to be on the panel with, you know, Liz and Lauren tonight. I saw that they were panelists also, and I just wanted to get us three together because I was like, we all have that same theme running through. There's just such a thread that connects us, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, learning myself tonight also.
Okay,
Thanks,
Sarah, you want to introduce our last but not least guest?
The drummer. Here comes the drummer. Elizabeth, which I think we're calling you Liz. Is that correct? This is my first
Yes.
time meeting you. So Liz Bostwick is a educator, Canva learning consultant, the author of Take the Leap, Ignite a Culture of Innovation. She is a multi-award winning educator who's passionate about creating the conditions to spark curiosity and unleash creativity to deepen engagement and empower learning. Welcome, Liz, to this panel. And as Stacey said, Stacey was the impetus of bringing all three of us, you guys, together in this room because she saw you all in disparate locations and different dates, and she was like, we need to all be together. So Liz was the final inclusion there. So welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. It really is an honor to be here with everybody. I welcome all the panelists too, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Opportunities to have these conversations are really what fuel me, so it's an honor.
So what we're going to do is, I think we have a few pretty layered questions prepared, and I'll start it off, and I'm going, everything is, of course, our topic is supporting teachers as thought partners tonight. And Sean and I are kind of framing everything, no matter where the conversation goes, we're framing everything around this idea of being adaptable and being accepting of change and being models for change. So that's kind of what we're always going back to, no matter where the conversation goes, and we're so open to exploration. And that's why we are supporting this panel structure, so that we can keep, as Sean said earlier, we can keep that support for one another and our thought leadership and thought partnership kind of spreading beyond this room. That's the way we like to look at it. So I'm going to start by asking a part of one of our first questions, and we're going to ask, people can chat while we're in the chat while we're going, if they want to, talk about ideas or point out things that are interesting. We're going to ask for this first panel, since we're doing this for the first time together, if we can save major questions to the end. And then I think it'll be great because then all the panelists can kind of jump in and help answer those questions. But feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat and share ideas and comment on things that you agree with or think are exciting. And of course, tweet about those things as well, if you are so inclined. So we ready? Okay, so I'm going to start this first question, and anybody who wants to answer, we're not calling on people, it's open discussion. So anybody that wants to jump in first, we're going to start by talking about modeling. So we all know about the power of modeling and empowering teachers to lead professional development. How can education leaders effectively create a culture where teachers are encouraged to become thought leaders and take that lead in shaping their own growth?
I'll open up the conversation. I just want to say that if we're in education, anyone in an educational organization is a leader for kids. It doesn't matter what role you serve in. You are here. This is the best gift in the world. You have an opportunity to leave a legacy in the hearts and minds of everybody who crosses your path, from the kids to your colleagues, to the community members that you serve, to the families. So I think we have to model what we want to see, because this role is that important. It's the most important role we can have. And along your path and along your journey, you are going to be encountering various types of people, right? And some people you meet for moments, some people you meet for minutes, some people you meet for hours, months, years. Some people stay in your life, some people come and go, right? But all of those people on your path actually model for you who they are, and then you take those pieces of those people with you. And why I'm mentioning that before we talk about this first question, which is around, I just need to go back to it myself, empowering teachers to lead, is that it starts with yourself. It starts with you. And all of these people are pieces of a puzzle that connect you to a bigger picture. They help bring a bigger picture to fruition. So to create that culture, you need to know who you are as a leader first, embrace the goodness in all that you've seen over the course of your journey, and then also use the experiences that have been unfavorable on your journey, because those are important experiences too. And the way we empower others is by leading by example. As Brene Brown would say, who we are is how we lead, right? So creating invitations for people to be at the seat at your table is an important part of this process. Active listening, recognizing gifts that people are bringing to the table, elevating them, and asking them when you see those gifts if they would share. Because that cross-pollination of ideas is really, really important within your own professional learning community, and then beyond in the broader educational community. So I think it's noticing, naming, knowing who you are so you can do that for others. And then those people, you're actually spreading that goodness because they hopefully take a piece of you with them. So that's the first part of my answer there. I don't want to take up all the space.
And I would just add on to that, that you may be an educator joining in today. And one thing I'd also encourage you is to not wait for somebody to create that culture. So if you are a teacher here today, for example, you don't need to wait to be a leader. You don't need to wait to activate your learning, wait for somebody else to do that. It's really about taking some of that control yourself. I've never been I've been a technology integration specialist. I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a consultant working with Canva too, but I haven't been in an administrative role. And so in my world, yes, to Lauren's point too, like I did have some amazing leaders who did model that. And then I think about how many teachers I taught alongside who would not necessarily feel that they had the expertise to go ahead and lead a professional development, but yet helping them to understand that they are experts and they do have a voice and important information to share is really essential. So I do want to encourage anybody here today to remember that you are a leader in any way that you want to embrace that.
I'll go with something a little bit more concrete, but vibing off of that idea of helping create this space for teachers to lead. So in my previous role, I was at a K through 12 school, and I had the opportunity to work with teachers in helping them integrate ed tech into their lessons. And modeling was really important to me because I wanted teachers to experience the power of these tools first so that they could see how this could impact their classroom and really feel the changes, right? Not just let's use this tool because it's a cool tool or it's the new way to do things, but really how can this change the dynamic of your classroom, and how can we get a better insight into individual students' needs, which is really a powerful thing at our school and a message that always came from leadership, this idea of really customizing the learning to the student and making it very relational. And I was at an independent school, and that was just very core to our messaging. So I always tried to go back there. And so when it comes to, empowering teachers, one thing that I really enjoyed about my role, one of my favorite things, was that I did these faculty highlights. So I was always curating examples of teachers taking some ideas that we were talking about and running with it. And sometimes they were just very simple ideas. Sometimes they were more complex. It didn't really matter. But what I tried to do was capture those and highlight them, and actually would begin by writing up a little highlight of how this teacher integrated whatever we were talking about. Maybe we had several meetings and it, came to fruition in this certain way. And so I did sometimes a small write-up, sometimes a larger write-up. And this really led to, first of all, teacher pride, like seeing that somebody's taking a moment to say, wow, like you want to highlight my work. And when, it was something that I had more detail about, I would write it up and it would get posted on the school website. And a teacher came to me one time and said to me that was so meaningful to her. And she didn't even think that she would care about it. But then just seeing that her classroom was up on the website and some examples of what her students had done. And then it gets posted to the Facebook group where, all parents interact and stuff like that. And it was just so meaningful. And so this would be the first step, right? Just getting that teacher saying, well, I did something that like took this spotlight that I thought was so simple, but it was like newsworthy. And then getting them to think about that idea of like, okay, how might I share next time? Or how might I be interested in that? And so by using that as a first step, I had so many teachers come back to me who wanted to like maybe co-write an article. And sometimes that was just something that we did together, because I did try and keep this curated list of authentic teacher projects so that teachers could meet other teachers who were doing things. There's like huge benefit when the teachers are teaching each other versus when I'm always teaching that part, right? But also just to help these teachers at some points, these teachers wanted to write articles for other websites and other publications. And we got to that level, and that was really cool. And then to take it to the next level, some teachers became interested in presenting, but they were afraid, like, I've never presented before. How am I going to do this? So we started together and we co-presented. I co-presented with a lot of teachers. And the first step might be that, I would write up a draft of the proposal and then we would do it together, because that can be a really intimidating part of the process. It's just writing a proposal. Like, how do you do this for the first time? So I think that idea of like modeling, but also this idea, it gets into that idea of collaboration too, like a high level of collaboration. I think though it starts with making those teachers feel empowered and special in a way, that they might not see in themselves, because teachers can be the harshest critics of themselves. Like they can just be so hard on themselves because they're always wanting to grow. And it's such an admirable thing, and why classrooms are constantly evolving. But also sometimes you have to take a minute to say, like, you're looking at yourself right now and you are constantly trying to grow, but let's compare yourself to 2 years ago and what you're doing now. Take that step back and then, allow them to really feel that growth curve that's been very high, where, teaching is constantly going ups and downs, because that's part of teaching and that's part of teaching children, right? So I don't want to say too much, go too much longer, but that idea of just really creating some faculty highlights and creating that teacher pride, I think is a great first step.
Absolutely love that idea, Stacey, of faculty highlights, and I know that's getting some buzz here in our chat as well. And Liz and Lauren, all of you, like, just in your response, so rich and meaningful, just like many TED Talks. So these are definitely some rewindable moments for those of you that are tuning in, whether it's live or whether you're currently in our panel chat here. Please be sure to share out your learning using the hashtag adapt, lead, and connect. And speaking of adapting, I want to kind of tease this out a little bit more. I know, Liz, you had mentioned, regardless of what your role is, you're a teacher, you're a leader, but in schools there are hierarchies, right? And there are roles and titles. And I'll start with you first, Liz, and then Lauren and Stacey. I'd love to hear your responses on this. when we're talking about the role of the school administrator or the school leader, the principal, someone like me, just as teachers are learning and growing and shifting and adapting, school leaders, we are called to do the same, and we are called to model that. Um, Part of that shift in adaptability is moving from for the school leader to move from a maybe less of a command and control mindset to more of a coaching mindset. So Liz, I'll start with you. How can school leaders support and encourage this paradigm shift in perspective and being that coach, being that thought partner, being that elbow buddy for educators and teachers that are in the marrow of the classroom?
Well, thank you for that, Sean. And I love this topic. Teacher leadership and encouraging teachers to lead is really near and dear to my heart. I think to begin with, just as Stacey was talking about, making those visits, elevating the culture, but then also looking at how do we develop our PLCs? How do we ensure that our teachers are facilitating those and engaged in those PLC opportunities? Because that's really where they get into the meat of the conversation. I've been a part of PLCs, I've facilitated them myself, and I've seen just the power of all that can take place with that growth. I also think that when educators can engage in reflection as well, and just being able to identify what they're doing well. Let me give you an example too. As a classroom teacher, as former classroom teacher, a lot of times I didn't know what I was doing might be unique, or somebody in another hallway, they might be doing something that's out of this world amazing. But as classroom teachers, you don't know because you're not the one getting outside of your own classroom. So I think anytime that we can also create the culture where educators are allowed to leave their classroom and do a pop-in. I've seen sometimes people have had the pineapple charts in the past where educators can visit other educators' classrooms and they can say, hey, this is a good time to be able to come in and see the instruction that's taking place. And I agree too with just the chat that sometimes the best PD is not always in your school or down the hall. Or I think it is, you're going to find it anywhere, like even across the hall. I remember my principal one time saying, you and your colleagues are all doing the same lesson, essentially. We planned together, we collaborated. He's like, but it looked different in every one of your classrooms, as it should, because we all have different students. But that made me curious. And I'm like, well, what are they doing that's different than what I'm doing? And that's where those rich conversations really come from. So I think that anytime that in our schools, we can have that culture where we have the conversation, allow opportunities to visit rooms, engage in that reflection, and PLCs, it's just really powerful.
Absolutely. PLCs are a great entry point for administrators to, almost something about that physical space and that kinship and creating and also creating and nurturing that space for conversation, for questioning, for innovation and iteration. So Lauren, what's your take on that? How can school leaders manifest this shift from a command and control mindset to more of a coaching mindset for teachers?
I thought you were going to say trust and inspire,
Well,
because we're talking about a book that I like very much. But let me start by saying that when I took the leap into a former leadership role, one of the first questions I asked myself, and I talked to myself a lot, I said, Lauren, what type of leader do you want to be? And my answer is always, I need to be the type of leader I always needed. And when I thought about what type of leadership has had an impact on me over the course of my career, they were the leaders that led with a coaching mindset. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I reflect back on those leaders on my path, they really did. And I'll tell you what I've done, I'll give you something a little more concrete now, is that I really want to change the narrative of observations. When I was a teacher, I've been observed approximately formally probably 40 times formally and more informally. And when I really think back about the observations that have had the most impact on my teaching and learning practices, I would say about a handful of those conversations. And I thought, wow, how can I change that as a leader now? And when I have conversations with teachers around teaching and learning and observations, it's a little bit different. They're getting used to me now, but I don't approach it in a very traditional way. I come into the conversation and I say, hey, I want you to know that I am so excited to be here with you and watch your students and you in action, because I know how much I'm going to learn from you. We just like my friend George Couros would say, we learn for each other, about each other, and with each other. And I say to them, this might be a little unique for you, because during this observation, I hope it's okay, and you can tell me if it's not okay, but I like to get in there with the kids. I like to stand right beside you in a moment when the kids are talking and thinking, and I will get up next to a teacher and I will say, what are you thinking right now? How can we lift the level of this moment? How can we capitalize on this moment, right? So they're prepared for this. And as they get to know me, they know, oh, here comes Lauren, we're going to teach together today. It's less like, I don't like to just be behind my laptop, and I do have to do that too. I'm putting that out there. I do have to sit and I do have to type, but I'm up and down constantly. I'll bring my laptop with me around the room. I sit with the kids. And as my friend Stephanie Rothstein would say, I want to be less evaluative and more collaborative. Everybody succeeds, right? Because we're here for kids. This is really, really important. I'm here to help teachers grow, and they're helping me grow, because I'm not teaching every day like they are anymore. But there are a couple other things I do in those coaching conversations for observations. We're always rooting our conversation in the mission and vision of the school district, so we're rowing in the same direction. We're bridging building level goals, right? We are targeting priority standards. We're not targeting 10 standards, right? What is it that we want the kids to know and be able to do? We're valuing the teachers as guides. I let the teacher lead the conversation. I'm actively listening to what they want to do. We consider different ways we give feedback. So when I leave a classroom, you could see me in the hallway on my cell phone. I'll open the Voxer app and I send myself a note in the Voxer app. It's really to the teacher. And I'll say, hey, to the teacher, I really love seeing you and your kids in action today. And I'll name something very specifically. I love the way you let the students facilitate the questions around that piece of literature. Wow, they were really pushing each other's thinking. And then I leave them with a wondering, right? And I wonder if next time, right? So they're getting that feedback right when I leave the classroom. They are not left wondering, I did not like that when I was a teacher. If an administrator would get up and just leave the room and not say anything, and then I had to wait till the observation write-up, or wait till the post-observation, I didn't like that feeling, right? And then always having those conversations and following up and circling back with teachers. How's that practice going? It's not just about this time that we're together, right? It's about over the course of time. And then always recommending a resource. There's never a time I don't meet with a teacher where I don't hand them a resource and say, hey, try this. I think it'll lift the level of your lesson. So I know that was a long answer, but this is something I'm really passionate about and something I'm working towards constantly to improve the observation process.
Definitely, Lauren. Definitely not too long at all. And I know in your tenure as assistant principal, you did that beautifully. I know that you've empowered mentors to do the same. And I know in your current work as director of literacy, like you are in there as a shoulder buddy, elbow partner, thought partner with and for teachers. So thank you for sharing that. And then of course Lauren called me out on the nod to the Covey book, Trust and Inspire, which is one of our favorite books that we've talked about, and it is brilliant. So Thank you. You know, I always got a book at a fingertips notice. So,
That's
Stacey,
how we connected over the Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. That's how we found each other.
that's right. And what better way that kind of led to our thought partnership, right? I mean, books too, they can be an entry point as well, whether it is through this digital space that we're in right now, you know, whether it is through X or Instagram or whatever it have be. So I often use my social media platforms to not only just to share what I'm listening to music wise, but to share what I'm learning and to share what I'm reading, hopeful that hey, somebody will bite and we'll talk, you know. And usually I'm that principal as a former high school English teacher that I will carry a book around, you know, just as an entry point for discussion to again create that safe space, perhaps, and conversation with the teachers that I get to serve. So that's right. The Infinite Game, Simon Sinek, that was our entry point to our wonderful friendship and thought partnership. Stacey, what about you? What is your I know this is something as well that you've modeled and and connected with school leaders on. So what advice do you have for school leaders adapting to this new mindset of coaching and being and shifting that mindset to a more coaching mindset and being that thought partner for teachers?
So I kind of want to take this in the direction of leaders as learners. And, really, as we're talking about leaders being adaptive and constantly evolving, how can leaders model risk taking and also infuse the ideas that they're trying to share? So again, I'm going to go to an example here, and I'm really excited because Bobby Palacino is an attendee tonight, and actually he's going to be on the next panel coming up. So anybody listening, listen next week for some great gems from him that he'll be able to share. But something that was amazing about working with Bobby, as he was my principal, he really was very, talking about trust, he trusted me a lot. And he was willing to take risks that pushed him beyond his comfort zone. But we did it collaboratively, and it was a process too. And it was such a huge thing for me to be able to teach through him. So instead of all the time, like we have so many times where we have workshops that are like very ed tech focused and we're leading them and they're great. They're great, right? But also when you're constantly seeing that person who's super comfortable with technology sharing that, you're like, well, she can do it. She makes it look easy, but it's so hard. Or, she's showing us in a very, in this moment of like focusing on this tool, but what does this really look like in action? Like, I can't see beyond that idea of like, oh, it could be cool for these ideas, but like, how does it really infuse? How does it really integrate? And so something that Bobby did with me was he said, like, I'm ready to try one of these ideas. And so we started with Pear Deck, which is this platform. If people haven't used it, it's this platform that allows you to take your Google Slides and make them interactive. And so that means that when you're live presenting, you can ask questions within the slides, but also when you are sharing those slides, you can share them in advance so that people can go at their own pace and preview the slides and give answers. And so he took this idea, and it evolved over time, but he took this idea to kind of like this idea of flipping a faculty meeting, because his thought was like, how do I really make the most meaningful time of when we are together? And faculty meetings are like few and far between. And also like you come to them, there's so many nuts and bolts to get through. And then there's like only time at the end, right? To have the fun stuff where we're like really interacting and we're really collaborating with our peers. It's such a valuable time. So he, was able to use this idea of using Pear Deck. And at the beginning, it was a little uncomfortable for him. And so what we did was he would call me into his office and we would sit down and he would have his, kind of his slides that he would have prepared. And then I helped him create that into the Pear Deck. And then he took it, like within a couple months, he was creating all this on his own. Even though when he was able to create it all on his own, we still had those meetings and he still asked for my feedback. And so it became this partnership where then that, because he kept, calling on me and kept inviting me in, it grew to like saying, okay, we did this, but like, how can I do the next thing? And then he started using Microsoft Flip to, make these videos himself. And then he incorporated them into what we were doing for team building and allowing teachers not only to view, right? I think this is a really key part because every teacher now is asked to view these tools from the student lens. And that is a really powerful point of coaching because it's not often that teachers get to see these tools from the student lens. And it oftentimes looks completely different. You're in the teacher dashboard versus you're in the student seat. But also, you get this great deal of empathy for being the student, right? Like, what does this really feel like? Or how does, like, sometimes it feels a little bad, but sometimes it also feels like super empowering. I know when Bobby started kind of flipping those faculty meetings and allowing us to see the slides in advance and put some of our thoughts on the slides, like it opened up for me. My personality is one where I'm not going to be the one to like always be raising my hand in faculty meetings. Like, do I speak up in faculty meetings? Yeah, sure. But am I going to be the first one? No, that's just never going to be me. But by giving me that time and space to look in advance, and to be able to like write down my thoughts. And then for him in the meeting to kind of show all the different responses that people have said so I can see what everybody is saying instead of just the people who are always talking up. It really shifted how I felt going into those meetings and also allowed me to come in feeling way more prepared. So it was great for me. And I know some teachers were like, oh, I don't like having to preview this thing in advance and have to like fill it all out in advance. And it just feels like something extra, And so maybe that goes into how they teach and how they want to instruct their classrooms. But also those same people could see the benefit of like the time and space that was opened up in the interactivity we could do. So again, it's just this idea of being so open to this collaboration. And, as a leader, I think a lot of times you feel this level of responsibility, like I need to know how to do this. And when I go up there, like I can't be fumbling, but to show a little bit of that vulnerability and also to know that, somebody else is there that like can help you out, that can support you, and allowing teachers to know that as well, because how powerful is that? Even in a time when maybe somebody asks for your help on the spot, like it's okay to do that. So it's okay for other teachers to invite me in to help them out. And it just really helped my connection with teachers too. And so I can't recommend that enough to leaders to give that opportunity. So it just opened up so many opportunities and changed the relationships I was able to have with teachers on like a really, really important level. And I couldn't have done that on my own.
Wow, and thank you, Stacey, for
Yeah.
sharing the narrative between you and Bobby, and also actually in the chat, Bobby just shared a really beautiful compliment for you and your coaching and support and expertise. So thank you all for sharing that. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you for that story, Stacey. And it's just inspiring that Bobby happens to be here and he's one of next week's panelists. So it's such a great synergy to see all of that happening and hear that story live here in this panel. And your answer to that question and the story that went along with it really feeds into what we're going to end with talking about tonight, which is really creating that environment for teachers to feel, for pretty much every teacher to feel encouraged to embrace that inner leader and contribute in the way that Stacey was kind of being coached to do so and really encouraged to do so. So that culture of leadership among teachers, really is a transformative thing. It's a transformative environment for any institution. So the last question is, how can leaders in educational spaces create that environment, much like the one Stacey was just describing, where every teacher feels like that, feels encouraged to embrace their inner leader, contribute to the growth and innovation of that school, And are there strategies that we can share that inspire teachers to ignite almost like a movement, to imagine these possibilities? We're constantly thinking about adaptation, and we can't do it as just a leader. We need teachers to be there with us. So how do we inspire them to ignite that within themselves and in the school? Maybe we can go back, swing back to Liz to start us off for this one.
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. And this conversation is just such a rich conversation to be a part of. I think when we're talking about building that culture where educators feel like they can be the leader and we're looking at just contributing to the growth and innovation of the school, we're also really focusing on the strengths of individuals and helping everybody in the school understand that everybody brings strengths. Working for Canva in a lot of my sessions, I work with school districts and school systems around the world. And this is pretty universal, where somebody will say, if something wrong is going to happen with the technology, it's going to happen with me. And one thing I always remind people is that these are the moments that we learn through, just like we learn to ride a bike or we learn to walk. And one thing I find is that when you help people to understand that it's okay that you make mistakes, it's okay that you don't know what you're doing. And when we actually acknowledge that this is where we're stuck, this is what we might need help on, that's where a lot of the learning can happen. So we want to, it's kind of twofold. I think it's a little bit of helping everybody understand what strengths they have, how those strengths play into the school, and understanding that other people might have areas that are not their strengths, but acknowledging this is not a strength of mine. How do I improve on it? How do I lean into other people within my school? So I think it goes back to, again, bringing people together, having that coaching opportunity, but also allowing people to get into classrooms to be able to see, what are you doing really well? And the same goes actually when I think about my students. I know we're talking about educators as leaders, but it reminds me of, as a classroom teacher, I did the same thing. I was constantly modeling to my students, trying to elevate leadership in the classroom, creating a culture where students were risk takers. And I always make that analogy to like a ropes course. And I always share this story about, when I was on a ropes course before, I watched one of my kiddos who was just flying through it, no worries. My other one was a little bit more methodical. And then my husband turned backwards because he just has this fear of heights. And it's just a natural feeling. And the same goes for educators. When you want people to take risks, they're going to go through one of those three emotions. They're either going to say, I'm going to go for it, or they want to know all the nuts and bolts before they can move forward. Or you're going to have people that turn back into safety because they're uncomfortable. They're afraid of failing. They're uncomfortable with what it's going to look like to their colleagues. So I think that the first thing we always want to focus on is creating the culture where people can acknowledge, hey, this is an area I need to grow in. How do I do that? And creating an environment where we can have those conversations. And likewise, when I'm working with people in Canva, one thing I always say is, go ahead, push all the buttons. You're not going to break anything. So just play and have fun. And even one of the best leaders I ever had the opportunity to work alongside, she's since retired and lives in Florida. And she was incredible because I remember back when we were developing the concept of having, we didn't invent the concept of makerspace, but we were developing a makerspace within our school. And it seemed a little bit overwhelming. We had a small makerspace with like paper products, cardboard, those types of things, but we really wanted to get moving with larger types of robotics and all types of departments within the makerspace. And I remember when we wanted to apply for a grant, but of course we didn't know if we'd get the grant. We didn't know how much money we'd get. And so I remember this team of teachers, we were kind of hung up on, we don't know, like, here's a list of some things we need, but gosh, this list is seeming rather large and this is going to be really expensive. And you could see that everybody began spinning on that. And I'll never forget, she did not come in and tell us what to do. She didn't say to shorten the list. Instead, what she said to us was, dream big. Dream as big as you can with this. And then if we need to par back with it, then we will. But we want you all today to dream big. We want you to imagine what you would like this to be like, and then let's go after it. And I think her being in that leadership style also really influenced me as a leader, because we have to feel like we can just go forward with it. And if we need to adjust our sails along the way, then we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Liz. And I'm just watching the time for everybody. I know that we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask Lauren if she has something she'd like to add to that about leaders creating an environment for teachers to feel like they can step forward as innovators.
Absolutely. And Liz, I'm just smiling so big because Liz is such a joy to collaborate with. I've collaborated with Liz on a few projects, and she coached me so seamlessly through that process. And I learned so much from her. So I'm just smiling big. And that's the power of our professional learning networks, right? So leveling the playing field is a huge part of my answer to this question. I'll tell a little story. I'll make it brief. A couple of years back, I want to say this was 4 or 5 years ago or so, I attended a conference with a bunch of administrators and my instructional coaching team. And we were so excited to be at this conference together. And what a great way to bring teachers and administrators together and have conversations to bring back to your schools, right? How can we use what we're learning from this conference to bring it back? And at lunchtime, when we all had a break, I was sitting at a table, and the table was pretty open. And then another group of administrators were sitting at another table. It was a pretty packed table. So any of the straggling administrators that were coming along would have had to sit with my team. We were the instructional coaching team. So they sat with us briefly. Then they realized, ooh, I'm with the coaches, right? They went back to the other table, squeezed themselves in to be with the administrative team, and it looked very awkward. And it was very uncomfortable because here I was at a table with all these open seats, right? And they're squishing in on the table next to us. And it was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. I understand they wanted to be with their colleagues. I get that piece of it. But what a missed opportunity to collaborate with your coaches who are going to be on the front lines with teachers, bringing back the work into the classrooms, which directly impacts kids. So, I just want to say to everyone here, meet people where they are too. Everyone's on a different place in their learning, and we have to respect and honor that. And use your words wisely. Be impeccable with your words. That book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements, is just one that I go back to constantly. He says, be impeccable with your words. What we say matters. And how we say it matters. Our body language matters. So we can invite people in, but if our body language isn't saying that or giving that invitation, you're sending a very different message. And be present and be patient. Change takes time, right? I'll repeat that. Change takes time. Things aren't going to happen overnight. And let the journey guide you. It will be okay. There's a lot of ebbs and flows in education in our world, right?
Yes, definitely. And I see a lot of hearts going up in the crowd there, hearts and clapping. And you're all going to be so excited when we're done and you get to see how many quotes are being tweeted from this conversation. It's a very quotable group, everybody in this room is what I'm going to say. It's very cool to see. No pressure, Stacey, but I'm gonna turn the mic to you to kind of close out this portion of the conversation. If there's anything that you would like to end with that with this question.
Okay, I'll go to the question and I'll keep it really brief. But
Okay.
Faculty-led PD, I think, can be so powerful, but I think it really it centers on administrators giving space and time, giving voice and choice. And these don't have to be super big things. Like, yes, it can be a part of a professional development day. Some of my favorite professional developments where I really do like kickstarting with like a speaker or something like that. There's bringing somebody from the outside in. I don't know. It does something for like bringing this level of energy and newness. And I do really appreciate that part. But then also having sessions that are led for teachers, by teachers, helping, getting back to the very beginning, my first thing about helping teachers feel empowered, because it starts there, so that they want to lead these sessions, and helping them build these sessions so that they're really good and meaningful, right? But the administration needs to open up that time and that space to have these teacher-led PDs, to arrange that. And I think a really powerful portion of these is to make them very ed camp style, where teachers have the opportunity to choose where they want to go. And also infusing this idea, it doesn't always have to be an elaborate like PD day, but can you infuse this into your faculty meetings? And maybe if you go back to my answer to question 2 and open up that time and space in the faculty meetings for more collaboration, you can send people into, you can just call it breakout groups instead of faculty-led PD, right? But I think that's just super powerful. So I'll leave it short. And I just appreciated everything everybody said, like all the big ideas. Mine is just a very concrete, small idea there.
Everything's a big idea, I think, in this panel is what I believe. So there's been such an active chat, and so I'm also realizing that the hour is pretty much up, but I wanted to turn immediately to questions. I know we've been answering some of them and shouting out people as we've gone along. But let's give a space for a couple of minutes, maybe if anybody has any direct questions that haven't been answered yet. And then along with that, if anybody has fresh ideas or things that they want to mention that they're doing or experiencing, or strategies that they want to share regarding or related to anything that we've talked about tonight, please don't hesitate to drop that in the chat as well. But questions would be welcome. We're going to do like 2 minutes of that, and then we'll do some closing words. Thanks, Frank. I love all the positivity tonight. It's really, really very exciting to see.
It's a nod to the wonderful panelists that we have here. They do, and I just speak from personal experience. They do a great job of bringing out the best in people and things and situations. So that is very evident in the chat here. And then also, Sarah, you're right. There's just some wonderful greatest hits on social media right now. If you're following the hashtag adapt, lead, and connect. So all just kind of the highly quotable things here.
We might be all questioned out. I think we did a pretty good job of answering as we've gone along. We
Yeah.
weren't sure what people were going to want, but it looks like
And I also
impressive.
just want to thank everyone for hanging in there with us. I feel like,
Yeah,
we have
definitely.
pretty much the full house here still. So thank you for choosing to be with us tonight, because boy, do we know that time is precious, and it is a real gift. And so that everyone took out, we all lead such busy lives. It really means a lot to us. And we can't thank you enough. We are so grateful. So sending gratitude to you all for being here and being a part of the conversation, and for Sarah and Sean doing such an amazing job leading this, and Stacey and Liz. It's been wonderful collaborating during this hour with you. I learned so much here.
Well, I echo your sentiments, Lauren, and I was going to say the same, in which I loved listening to both you and Stacey and listening to your responses. Just looking through the chat and seeing what resonated with people too is also inspiring. I always walk away from these conversations ready to actually engage in more conversations. So fortunately, my husband's a building principal, so I might have to loop him in on the conversation too.
I'm just
Absolutely.
writing a last minute call out in the chat here. If anybody, I know a lot of us know each other and follow each other, but I'm putting a request to drop your Twitter handle in the chat if you want to connect with each other, or if you have another way you'd like to connect. But I see a lot of people sharing ideas and even talking with each other or to each other within the chat. So let's drop our handles there. And some of you have really quotable things in the chat tonight that I might reach out to you and say, hey, can I share this on Twitter? And if you're okay, I would love to quote you as well as part of our hashtag that we're using for this series. So I won't even bother finishing typing because everyone's doing it anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
We're just so grateful for all of this and just the conversation. And as I shared at the beginning with Sarah, let's definitely keep the conversation going, by sharing your whatever your social media platform handle is, following the Adapt Lead Connect hashtag. I know from personal experience, in working and collaborating with all four of the folks here, folks are very open, and also it seems to in the chat as well, just seeing some familiar friends and some new faces. So let's definitely be each other's thought partner and be that person in as we begin to make and continue to make that shift as we adapt as leaders and as collaborators and thought partners.
Yes, definitely. And I'm going to leave everybody with a couple of just looking ahead things. I just put a link in the chat for a certificate that we can issue you, that if you would like to use this panel or any future panels as part of PD hours, it's just a quick little link to fill out your information, and then we will get you a digital. There's I think a image there of what your certificate will look like. So if anybody needs that, we just wanted to have it ready and available. It might be that you don't need it or don't want it. But there it is. If you need that for any purposes, we'll be happy to give you that. And then I also just wanted to share, especially since a couple, if I can get this shared again, I also just wanted to share our little promo for next week's panel, because we have been, of course it's not working. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. So next week, we have Bobby in the chat, and we've been talking about him and telling stories about him. But next week, we're talking about modeling adaptability and mindset for true professional growth. And we have I think Natasha's still here in the chat too. And Natasha's also going to be on a really cool panel in February, at the beginning of February, about AI-powered leadership. So that those are two panels that are coming up that we have part of their participants are right here in the room with you today. So the link I shared earlier, which I can share again, is where you can register for all future panels. So thank you for coming, and we hope that everybody, I see a lot of people saying they are taking away so many little tidbits and big ideas. So I hope that this inspires you to keep joining us for these, what we're calling, leaders inspiring leaders. This is PD for leaders by leaders, and we want us all to kind of embrace that. Any last words? I think we're done.
I think so. Lauren, Liz, Stacey, thank you so much for the gifts, the collective gifts of your time, your expertise, your heart. Your impact resonates, and I know that it continues to resonate from and through this panel. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules, from family and friends and other commitments to make this a priority for kicking off our first panel in the Adaptability and Leadership series with Swivel. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night. And